Look, this is one of those Seahawks storylines that might not sound huge at first, but the more you think about it, the more it feels like something fans need to keep an eye on. Because Seattle didn't make this move just for what happened last season. They made it because they believe there's a lot more coming. And honestly, that's where it gets exciting. This offense has a chance to look different, faster, and way more dangerous if everything clicks. The timing, the chemistry, the role, the matchups, all of that matters. And if this player really takes that next step, we might look back and say, the Seahawks were ahead of everybody on this one. So let's talk about why this could become one of the most important stories of the season. If you're ready for Seahawks football, hit that like button and drop "Go Hawks" in the comments. Something is starting to become very clear in Seattle. And it is the kind of thing that might look small right now, but could completely change how this offense feels once the season gets going. Because when the Seahawks made their decision this offseason, they were not just paying for what Rashid Shaheed had already done in Seattle. They were paying for what they believed he could become once he finally had time, chemistry, rhythm, and a real role inside this offense. And that is where this gets interesting. Because when Seattle brought Rashid Shaheed back on a 3-year deal worth more than $34 million guaranteed, not everyone loved it. Some people looked at the production and immediately called it an overpay. They saw a receiver who did not even reach 200 receiving yards with the Seahawks and wondered why John Schneider would commit that kind of money so quickly. On the surface, that reaction made sense. If you only look at the box score, it is easy to ask why Seattle moved so aggressively. But the Seahawks clearly saw something deeper. They saw the speed. They saw the explosiveness. They saw the fit. And more importantly, they understood the context around why Shaheed never fully broke out after arriving in Seattle. He was thrown into the fire in the middle of the season. That is not easy for any receiver. It takes time to learn a new offense. It takes time to understand spacing, timing, route adjustments, and how a quarterback wants the ball placed. Even though Shaheed had already played under offensive coordinator Clint Kubiak before, building chemistry in the middle of a season is still a very different challenge. And that showed. There were moments where it felt like the Seahawks were one step away from unlocking him, but the timing was just a little off. One week, it felt like this would be the game where Shaheed finally exploded. Then he would catch a pass or two, maybe make one nice play, but the full breakout never really arrived. Sometimes Sam Darnold would put the ball just a little too far. Other times it would be just a little short. It was not because the talent was missing. It was because the connection was not fully built yet. And that is why this offseason matters so much. Now, Rashid Shaheed is not trying to learn everything on the fly. He is not trying to earn trust while the games already count. He is getting the full offseason, OTAs, minicamp, the stretch before training camp, all of it matters. And according to what has been coming out, Shaheed and Sam Darnold are starting to find their stride. That is the part Seahawks fans should be paying attention to, because if that connection becomes real, this offense suddenly has a different kind of weapon. The most important piece here is not just that Shaheed is fast. Everybody already knows that. He has always had the ability to create explosive plays. In New Orleans, a lot of his value came from those big moments, the plays where he could flip the field or punish a defense for one bad angle. But Seattle seems to be looking for more than that. The goal now is not just to have him survive as a deep threat. The goal is to turn him into a more complete offensive piece. That is where the upside becomes much bigger. Because if Shaheed can become more than a receiver who only wins on explosive plays, then the Seahawks are not just getting a gadget-type weapon. They are getting someone who can be used on quick throws, motion, shifts, underneath concepts, and designed touches that allow his speed to work before and after the catch. That is a completely different conversation. And there was one story from Hawk Blogger that really gives this whole thing life. Jake Bobo was apparently on the sideline and said something like, "Here comes a big play," right before Sam Darnold found Rashid Shaheed for a big catch that may have ended up as a touchdown. That kind of moment matters because it shows that teammates are already starting to recognize when something is developing. They can feel the rhythm. They can see the timing. They know when the defense is in trouble. That is not something you fake. And when you connect that with the report from ESPN's Jeremy Fowler, it becomes even more interesting. Fowler mentioned that Seattle is expected to use more motion and shifts in the offense, and that Sam Darnold is comfortable with it. He also said Shaheed had a strong spring and that he and Darnold are hitting it off. That is huge, because more motion and more shifts can create exactly the kind of matchups Shaheed needs. This is where the story starts to feel bigger than just one receiver getting paid. This is about how Seattle wants to build the offense. Last season, there was a major focus in the passing game on Jaxon Smith-Njigba, and for good reason. He was the player the offense leaned on. He stepped up, carried a massive responsibility, and became the centerpiece of the passing attack. But asking him to do that again, at that same level, every single week, would not be smart team building. Seattle needs answers around him. It needs other players who can punish defenses when they overload coverage toward number 11. And Rashid Shaheed might be the biggest answer, because defenses are going to pay attention to Jaxon Smith-Njigba. They have to. They are going to shade zones toward him. They are going to bracket him. They are going to put their best corners on him. They are going to build entire coverage plans around making sure he does not wreck the game. That is where Shaheed can hurt people. If defenses are tilted toward JSN, Shaheed is going to see more one-on-one looks. He may see the second corner, maybe the third. Depending on how the Seahawks use motion, he could even end up matched against safeties or linebackers in certain looks. And if that happens, Seattle has to love that matchup. Because with Shaheed's acceleration, quickness, and ability to separate, all it takes is one mistake for the entire defense to pay for it. So now the question becomes simple, but it is a big one. Did the Seahawks overpay for what Rashid Shaheed was last season? Or did they get ahead of the market on what he is about to become? Because if this chemistry with Sam Darnold is real, if the offense is being shaped in a way that gives him more chances, and if defenses are still forced to focus most of their attention on Jaxon Smith-Njigba, then Shaheed could be walking into the best opportunity of his NFL career. Now, I want to know what Seahawks fans think. Do you believe Rashid Shaheed is about to have a career year in Seattle? Or do you still think that contract was too much? Drop your opinion in the comments, because this one could divide a lot of fans before training camp even starts. Because when Seattle brought him in, the idea was probably that he could still be a strong second or third option in this offense. And look, there is respect there. Kupp has had an incredible career. He is from Washington, and there is a real local connection that makes Seahawks fans want this to work. But the reality is that he is not the same player he used to be. That does not mean he cannot help this team. He absolutely can. But at this stage, it feels like his role is shifting. He is no longer the receiver who needs to be treated like the main engine of the passing game. He is not the guy Seattle should be forcing the offense through. And if he settles into being the third option, or maybe even the fourth, depending on how Torrey Horton develops, that actually opens the door even wider for Rashid Shaheed. That is why this whole thing matters. Shaheed is not just competing for random touches anymore. He may be walking into a real opportunity to become the second most dangerous receiver in this offense. Jaxon Smith-Njigba is going to draw the most attention. Kupp can still work underneath and provide experience. Horton is still a name to watch if he gets healthy and develops. But Shaheed brings something different from all of them. Pure speed, instant field-flipping ability, and the kind of explosiveness that can change a game in one snap. And if Seattle can combine that speed with better timing, better route usage, more motion, and more quick touches, then this offense becomes much harder to defend. That is the part that should excite Seahawks fans. This is not only about hoping Shaheed catches a deep ball once every few weeks. This is about building an offense where defenses have to think before the snap, where motion forces hesitation, where JSN pulls coverage, where Darnold knows exactly where Shaheed will be, where one wrong step by a corner turns into a touchdown. So when people say Seattle overpaid, maybe the better question is this: what if the Seahawks did not pay for last year's production? What if they paid for the breakout before everyone else saw it coming? Because if Rashid Shaheed becomes the player this offense seems to be preparing him to be, that contract could look a lot smarter very quickly. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think Rashid Shaheed can become the Seahawks' true number 2 weapon this season, or are fans getting too excited too early? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit that like button if you want more Seahawks updates like this, and subscribe to the channel so you do not miss anything before training camp. Go Hawks!